Season 5 of Doctor Who aired from the 2nd of September 1967 to the 1st of June 1968. It was made up of 40 episodes that spanned over 7 different serials. It was once thought that the entire season was missing, but over the last 30 years, a number of serials have been found, and this is the only season in which an episode is known to exist but has not been returned to the BBC. This is also the first season to not have a single serial featuring the Daleks, as well as not a single historical serial. In total, 18 out of the 40 episodes are currently missing, although 4 of the 7 serials have now had their missing episodes animated. Season 5 was prominent for introducing recurring characters such as Colonel Lethbridge Stewart, who was later become the Brigadier, the Cyber Controller, and Professor Edward Travers, played by Jack Watling, Deborah Watling's father. The TARDIS team consisted of Patrick Troughton as the Second Doctor, Fraser Hines as Jamie McCrimmon, Deborah Watling as Victoria Waterfield, and the introduction of Wendy Padbury as Zoe Heriot. Tomb of the Cybermen. The first serial of the 5th season featured a reprise of the Cybermen, as well as the introduction of both the Cyber Controller and Cybermats. It exists completely and is therefore the first Second Doctor serial to do so. It was rediscovered in the 1990s and was the only full serial in the 5th season until The Enemy of the World was found in 2013. It was written by Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis, directed by Maurice Barry, produced by Peter Bryant, and consisted of 4 25-minute episodes. In 1991, it was returned to the BBC from Hong Kong by the company Red Fusion. When the serial was released for the first time in May 1992, it outsold the films Silence of the Lambs and Aliens. Although the character Toberman was intended to be deaf, which is featured in the novelisation but not the serial itself, the character plays into a number of racist stereotypes from the time. His deafness was also going to foreshadow his transformation into a Cyberman, with his hearing aid being used as a catalyst. He was played by Roy Stewart. The serial was produced by Peter Bryant instead of Innes Lloyd as a trial run to taking over the permanent job of producer.
Try to give us a smooth takeoff, Doctor. We don't want to frighten her.
A smooth takeoff?
A smooth takeoff? What a nerve!
The TARDIS, filled with our crew the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria, land on the planet Telos, where they stumble upon a rather hostile archaeological expedition. The expedition intends to break their way into an ancient tomb in order to discover the possible remains of some Cybermen who died out centuries before. Although the archaeologists are being sensible in their approach, the expedition's funder, Miss Cafton and Clegg, want to get inside at any cost. When the Doctor realises that the group are searching for Cybermen, he decides he must stay to try and keep things safe. Once inside, they all split up to investigate puzzles and chambers, finding a mock Cyberman set up as shooting practice, and a metal sarcophagus which is controlled by levers and buttons. Victoria finds a Cybermat, and with that discovery it is revealed that someone damaged the expedition's ship, meaning that they are trapped here until it can be repaired. With that time delay, Clegg becomes acquainted with the Cybermen's operating system and manages to unseal the tomb. While the girls remain upstairs, with Victoria tasked to guard the suspicious Miss Cafton, the others descend into the tomb, where hundreds of frozen Cybermen are kept in cells. Cafton drugs Victoria, and when she falls unconscious, traps the others in the tomb by shutting the tomb hatch. Clegg uses this opportunity to wake the Cybermen up from their slumber, melting them and holding the others at gunpoint. Meanwhile, Victoria has woken up and is also being held at gunpoint by Miss Cafton. The Cybermat attacks Cafton, knocking her out, and before it can do any more damage, Victoria takes Cafton's gun and shoots it. The Cybermen down in the tomb reanimates the Cyber Controller. Victoria gets some help from the people working on the ship and opens the tomb, while the others manage to sneak out just in the nick of time, all barring Toberman, who is taken over and controlled by the Cybermen. Cafton and Clegg are taken to the shooting range and imprisoned inside. While there, they deduce a way to manipulate the Cybermen to do what they want and decide to threaten the rest of the group with it. The Cybermen, Toberman and the Cyber Controller break through the tomb, killing Cafton and knocking Clegg unconscious. The Doctor manages to wake up Toberman, and in turn Toberman destroys the Cyber Controller with his strength. The Doctor refreezes the Cybermen and arms the tomb once more, trying to protect anyone to come visiting in the future.
You probably can't remember your family.
Oh, yes, I can when I want to. And that's the point, really. I have to really want to bring them back in front of my eyes. The rest of the time, they sleep in my mind, and I forget. And so will you.
This has to be one of my favourite Cybermen stories of all time. For some reason, the combination of archaeological work and Doctor Who, especially with Cybermen, works so very well. This concept is repeated a number of times, both in Doctor Who and in my favourite, in the Bernice Summerfield series, and as a significant base under siege stories, this small, intense character list really brings this story into focus. It's truly tense at times and goes into places that other stories really haven't gone before. Victoria, for example, uses a gun to shoot a Cybermat in a brilliant move that truly surprised me. In terms of characterisation, Victoria is a lot bolder and braver than a lot of people give her credit for, just because she screams. She's a very, very intelligent young woman and complements the Doctor and Jamie fantastically. I have seen a lot of people dismiss her for various different reasons, but throughout this series I think she has one of the best character arcs in the entirety of Doctor Who. She loses her only family after being kept prisoner by the Daleks for weeks, only to protect her new friends no matter what. Like, come on, she fully shoots a Cybermat here, guys. Why don't you think she's amazing? You know? The Cybermen are truly terrifying in this serial because, at least for the first 2 episodes or so, you don't actually know whether they're really alive or not until you see all the pods of the frozen ones, which is a fantastic visual. Overall, the aesthetics of this serial are completely on point, whether it's the engravings on the 2 entrances to the design of the cyber technology and the cyber leader. Also, seeing the origins of the Cybermats were really fun because they have changed it so little over the years and they look hilarious here. On the whole here, I think it's one of the strongest, if not the strongest, Cybermen stories of the Second Doctor era. It just works so well on every different front. And it has nice nods to Egyptology and the Egyptology mania of the 1920s with the different tombs. Just an absolutely spot-on serial on every front. The Abominable Snowmen. The second serial of Season 5 was The Abominable Snowman. It was written by Marvin Haysmith and Henry Lincoln, directed by Gerald Blake, produced by Innes Lloyd, and made up of 6 25-minute episodes. Only episode 2 still exists, with the rest being missing due to the BBC's drunken policy, although it has been fully animated as well. I listened to the story through the audio narration, as when I got to this serial it has not been released through animation yet. Jack Watling, the father of Deborah Watling, was introduced as Professor Edward Travers, who would return later in the season for yet another Yeti-based serial. It also showed the first appearance of the Yeti and the Great Intelligence. Both appeared again in the Web of Fear, then it would be another 44 years before the Great Intelligence was reprised in the specials The Snowmen and The Name of the Doctor. The TARDIS arrives in the hillsides of the Himalayas, where the Doctor intends to return a holy relic to a nearby Buddhist temple. When outside, they notice a giant footprint in the snow, where the Doctor tells Jamie and Victoria to stay safe within the TARDIS while he goes into the temple alone. Despite this, Victoria gets bored and convinces Jamie to investigate the footprints with her. They find a man-made cave structure, and at the last minute they get trapped inside by a creature with large claws. Because they cannot get out, they decide to go deeper into the cave system, where they find silver spheres on plinths, before they are interrupted by the creature, a giant Yeti. Escaping by causing a cave-in, they steal the sphere and head towards the monastery. Unfortunately, as soon as the Doctor has reached the monastery, he was accused of murder by Professor Travers, a researcher searching for the Yetis whose friend was murdered in front of him. He is used as bait to lure out the Yetis, who seem to be murderous instead of their normal, gentle and shy nature. When Jamie and Victoria meet up with Travers, he realises the Doctor was innocent and the 4 trap a Yeti with a net, giving them a chance to investigate it. Turns out it's actually a robot which is being controlled by someone else using the spheres. The Yeti, now with spheres, breaks out of the net, escaping into the mountains. The Doctor and Jamie try to reach the TARDIS but is surrounded by Yetis, and Travers watches as the abbot of the monastery goes in and out of the cave. It appears he is controlling them. Victoria investigates while back at the monastery alone and figures out exactly what's going on here, before the creature called the Great Intelligence wipes her mind and gets the Yeti to attack her. Victoria, then catatonic, makes her way back to the Doctor, who tries to help her remember as much as possible, and Jamie takes care of her while the Doctor confronts the Great Intelligence, who is slowly taking over the area for himself. While the Doctor and Jamie try and stop the Great Intelligence, Victoria fights his control over the Yeti, holding them back to try and buy the others time. The Great Intelligence crumbles and the Yeti are all lifeless. Travers continues his search for the real Yeti, while the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria happily go away onto their next adventure.
Now, this creature, what was it like?
Oh, it was huge and all covered with hair, like a sort of bear.
It attacked us.
It does sound like your Abominable Snowman, Travers.
Oh, but they wouldn't attack anyone.
Oh, I always thought so.
I have mentioned before about how sometimes I struggle with the audio narration, having preferred a visual element to it. I believe that I would like this story so much more if I could have seen most of it, and this only really adds insult to injury since the animation was announced the week after I had listened to it. The story itself was great, and it's wonderful to finally have a reoccurring friendly character in the mix with Professor Travers. The uniqueness of the setting, which was mostly filmed in Snowdon National Park, is a nice change as it's the first story other than the Aztecs to really take place outside of Europe. The story itself was alright, probably the weakest of all the stories in season 5 for me, but I do wish I had waited and watched this one when the animation came out, especially because it took so long in making this video. However, I think that what did stand out to me, particularly Victoria and Professor Travers, were the strongest parts of this serial. Victoria as a character once again is exceeding expectations. It is her that decides to explore and figure out what is going on, while Jamie just wants to stay and quietly wait for the Doctor while being safe. She is the one that single-handedly holds off the Yeti while the Doctor and Jamie work together to defeat the Great Intelligence. This whole video is just going to be me defending Victoria because she's just such a fascinating and rich character in this season. The Ice Warriors. Next up is The Ice Warriors, the third serial of the 5th season. It is important as yet another serial which introduced a reoccurring villain, the Ice Warriors. It was written by Brian Hales, directed by Derek Martinez and produced by Innes Lloyd, consisting of 6 25-minute episodes. Episodes 2 and 3 are missing, although they have been fully animated. Although the writer envisioned the Ice Warriors as looking like space-safe medieval humans, the costume designer Martin Ball created the iconic reptilian look, with some of the initial concepts looking like an upright crocodile with Viking helmets. Hales also contributed some of the inspiration for this story to the real archaeological digs, including the Sutton Hoo discovery in 1939. Most memorably, for me at least, the Ice Warriors as a concept are very reflective of the knowledge of Mars from the time. It was stated in the serial that Mars has a nitrogen atmosphere, causing the warriors to struggle in our atmosphere, even though the Earth's atmosphere is 80% nitrogen and Mars does not have such an atmosphere. It also approaches concepts that were very much in the public eye in 1967, including concepts such as nuclear winter and the possibility of a new ice age. The changing climate was a thread throughout this season, which focuses on the environment and greed and how that can damage the world in which we live.
Give me a hand. That was a blind landing. Is that what you call it?
While a group of scientists are working on an ionizer project, stumble upon an archaeological wonder, what seems like a Viking soldier trapped in the great ice glaciers surrounding them. They melt the man and realise that it's not a Viking at all, but something else, something far, far worse. The TARDIS arrives in the glacier, and the gang stumble into the ionizer and get given roles. Clint, the head of the ionizer, quickly realises that the Doctor knows his stuff and asks for the Doctor's help with the machine, which is malfunctioning. It is designed in order to control the sun's heat on specific areas of the planet, causing artificial heat and coldness at will. Unaware that the creature from the ice has woken up, it manages to knock out Jamie while taking Victoria as a hostage. Once the Doctor realises that it is an alien, he figures out that the spaceship could cause a massive explosion if the ionizer is used near it. Jamie and another employee of the base, Arden, go out to try and find the spaceship and in turn Victoria, while the Doctor stays behind to try and keep things as safe as he can. The Ice Warrior, Varga, finds his crewmates and melts them from the ice, bringing them all back to life. Once alive, they set about digging out their spaceship, keeping Victoria as bait. Jamie and Arden stumble upon it, but Varga shoots them down, killing Arden and badly wounding Jamie. Victoria finds their communication device, and as Jamie is rescued by some local hermits, Victoria tries to contact the Doctor, telling him of what is going on by almost being shot by Varga herself. Back at the ionizer, the Doctor, devastated by the possible death of Jamie, creates a chemical weapon that can be used against the Ice Warriors. Jamie is slowly recovering, but he's lost control of his legs, while Victoria has escaped but is trapped in an avalanche. The Doctor and Jamie are thankfully reunited, and he sends them back to the base, with the Doctor going on to stop the Ice Warriors on his own. Victoria is brought back to the Ice Warriors by a rogue human against the ionizer. The Doctor wants the team back at the ionizer to start getting ready for an attack, but they will not do anything without permission from their computer, relying on it far too much. The Ice Warriors attack the ionizer, but the Doctor stops them from causing too much damage with his chemical weapon. One by one, the team at the ionizer are rebelling against Clint as he sits unmobile because of the computer's reactions. The Doctor and Victoria sabotage the Ice Warriors' weapon so it should only really affect them, shooting it at them and causing everyone to collapse. The Ice Warriors retreat to their ship and try to escape, but their ship breaks up in the atmosphere, while the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria have slipped away unnoticed. The Ice Warriors is the first of the next couple of serials which have underlying themes of climate change and its effect that it has on the world. In this case, climate change has caused a lack of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, freezing the world and making it unlivable. Though the scientists research, they are trying to use technology to reverse these effects and warm up the planet using the ionizer, saving the people. This is essentially as a backdrop to the actual Base Under Siege story, and the reluctance to stop the Ice Warriors has an actual parallel for the first time, with the chance that the ionizer could stop, and with that, the chance to save the world from the big freeze. The Ice Warriors themselves have a great first story, bursting into the scene with fantastic design and an iconic menace. I loved the alien in the ice concept, which, while similar to the Cybermen in the tomb from the previous serial, instead it has the accidental stumble instead of a more on-purpose uncovering. It's man curiosity that starts the chain reaction of disaster. The Ice Warriors are also in a great snapshot of 60s science and planetary knowledge. They were created with what was known about Mars at the time, specifically the atmosphere and how life could exist. All in all, it is a wonderful reflection on how planetary science and our exploration of Mars has developed. The subplot between the head of the base and the scientists that run it, which I have omitted from the summary, is fascinating because it also discusses the disconnect between workers and their bosses. The head of the base relies far too much on computer and technology, which is very annoying, but the dissident that starts happening against the head really puts the whole situation into perspective. I really enjoyed this story, apart from the few quirks like the computer noises, and the fact that the Doctor and crew just disappear at the end is wonderful, leaving the others confused as to what actually happened. In fact, if you want to hear me chat a little bit more about this serial, check out the video linked below in the description where I am actually a guest on Davis's channel of Broke Canon fame, trying to convince him that this serial is good, actually. The Enemy of the World. The fourth serial of the fifth season showed Patrick Troughton playing both the Doctor and the main antagonist Salamander. It was written by David Whittaker, directed by Barry Letts, and produced by Innes Lloyd. It consisted of 6 25-minute episodes and exists in its entirety. It was once thought as mostly missing, though the rest of it was discovered in a relay station in Nigeria in 2013. This serial was the last to be produced while Sidney Newman was head of drama at the BBC, and the first to be directed by Barry Letts, producer of the majority of John Pertwee's run. The Base Under Siege format of the serials made up the majority of Season 5, but The Enemy of the World was the only serial to not have that format, with worldwide travel and different types of transport. This is another story which deals heavily with climate change and the effect that it has on the general population. Although a lot of the change in climate was artificially caused by Salamander here, the overpopulation, subsequent food shortages, and as a large theme throughout it. It also commented on the exploitation of food supplies and chains in order to achieve power through greed, something heavily criticised by the Doctor. The setting of this story spanned from Australia to Hungary and was in 2018.
Don't you protect his life every day?
Yes! As I say, sometimes we do what we have to do, not what we want to do.
The gang arrive in Australia, where they are immediately attacked. Luckily, a woman named Astrid saves them and explains that the men believe that the Doctor is someone else, an evil politician and scientist called Salamander. Her boss, Giles, tries to convince the Doctor to impersonate Salamander to uncover his corruption, although the Doctor is hesitant to do this whole situation. They are confronted by Salamander's guards, and the Doctor is forced to do an imitation, which leads him to agreeing to help. Jamie and Victoria travel to the real Salamander's crew, infiltrating his staff to gather evidence. Victoria working in the kitchens, while Jamie stages a fight to save Salamander's life, gaining his trust quickly. While they are there, they witness the framing of a scientist who does not bend to Salamander well. He is arrested, and while Victoria and Jamie try to help him escape, he is assassinated by Salamander's men. Jamie and Victoria are themselves arrested after being exposed for trying to help others, and the Doctor is forced to follow Giles' commands and sneak into the local base to find out what is really going on. If he does, Giles will try and rescue Jamie and Victoria. Farah, Salamander's food tester, turns on him, but is shot before she can get information out there. It then transpires that Salamander locks himself away for hours at a time, in which he goes into a secret bunker. Down there, he has a small group of people convinced that they are the only survivors of a grand nuclear war. He uses them to effect natural disasters on the surface on command, securing him power both above and below ground in a grand web of conspiracy. In a grand explosion of this web, both humans underground and the Doctor and crew above rebel at the same time. Salamander narrowly escapes disaster and the meeting of the two factions by breaking into the TARDIS and trying to trick Jamie and Victoria into taking him off instead of the Doctor. Luckily, they find out just in the nick of time, with the Doctor creating a vacuum which pulls Salamander out of the TARDIS, lost to the time-space vortex forever.
Pretending to save my life was ingenious. But ingenuity requires a constant stream of new ideas. Yours seem to have dried up.
For some reason, watching this serial gave me some of the most anxiety ever while watching a Doctor Who story. The whole serial kept me on the edge of my seat, absolutely terrified at what would come next. For a lot of the stories that have come before or after, I have known generally what's happened, or I've had a rough idea due to the beats of the Doctor Who story, but truly with this one, I just could not for the life of me figure out what was going to happen. Every twist ended up hitting me like a ton of bricks to the point that I had to take a break halfway through, and I kept thinking about it for days and days after. Patrick Troughton's performance as Salamander was outstanding, and it was very easy to differentiate between the two characters just by their demeanour and attitude. Even when the Doctor was pretending to be Salamander, it's clear that he was acting as a man with very little real knowledge of him. The thread of climate change and the threat of overpopulation and nuclear war, for example, is woven into it perfectly. I could probably write an essay on the politics in this serial alone, but I will just sum up my thoughts quickly before we move on. The threat of a nuclear war and its destruction was at its peak in the 1960s, so the idea that a madman would manipulate his way into trapping people or into a bunker pretending that such horrors were taking place on the surface is absolutely terrifying. The people in the bunker are completely helpless, relying on Salamander for everything, including food and news of the world outside. He is using the people inside the bunker as his own personal workforce in order to create natural disasters on the surface, causing famine, droughts, and natural disasters everywhere. Using that chaos, he cements himself as one of the most powerful people on the planet. It's a very powerful story demonstrating how anything can be manipulated or twisted by malicious people in order to gain more personal power. It highlights the lack of morals and just straight up corruption of such people. Although it was very reflective of the time then, it can certainly mirror what is happening in modern times too. It is set in 2018 but has a distinct eerie echoes of what's going on now. Although the technology is certainly not as well developed as they predicted it would be, the corruption of leaders and corporations are certainly well portrayed. From presidents to CEOs, including men such as Bezos and Musk, this warning of corruption and lack of morals really shines through. As we experience the climate crisis, such people are having billionaire space race with no real concern for the rest of the world and its safety and preservation. I think this is both why I really enjoyed and really dreaded this serial, as it shows a world which is far too close to ours for me to be comfortable. The Web of Fear. The 5th serial of the 5th season saw the return of Professor Travers, the Yeti, and the Great Intelligence. It consisted of 6 25-minute episodes written by Mervyn Haysmith, Henry Lincoln, directed by Douglas Camfield, and produced by Peter Bryant. The most notable appearance in this episode, however, was the appearance of Nicholas Courtney to Doctor Who, although this time in his most prominent role, that of Lethbridge Stewart. Only one episode was known to exist for almost 40 years until the rest, except from episode 3, the episode in which the Doctor met Lethbridge Stewart, was found with the Enemy of the World in 2013 in Nigeria. The missing episode was animated in black and white. This episode is known to exist, but in the hands of a private collector and therefore not with the BBC. Innes Lloyd left as main producer in the previous serial, with his scriptwriter-editor Peter Bryant taking over in that role. With the introduction of Lethbridge Stewart, the increasingly confusing dating system begins to appear, with this story taking place in any year from 1965 to 1971.
I tell you, it did. It was flashing.
Now, Jamie, if that light had come on, we'd have landed, wouldn't we?
Look, I'm not arguing about that.
But we're still travelling, aren't we? So how could you do that?
Look, I don't know. All I know is that thing came on. Now, I'm not taken to seeing things. At least I don't think I am.
Following on from a previous serial, as the chaos is taken under control, the TARDIS crash lands in a dark tunnel surrounded by iron bars. Turns out they are just in the London Underground, which has been taken over by a mysterious web. A post-apocalyptic scenario has gripped London after the webbed menace takes over, with the Doctor getting separated from the others while Jamie and Victoria join up with the military presence in the tunnels. The Doctor stumbles upon creatures, the Yeti. Jamie and Victoria are briefed on what has happened and figure out that it is the Great Intelligence behind the issues. Victoria also stumbles upon an aging Professor Travers, who almost knows what is going on and is trying his best to help. As the web spreads, the soldiers at the base argue amongst themselves about what to do, and Jamie goes out to try and find the Doctor. Hearing that he has left, Victoria also tries to go out and find the Doctor. However, she's successful in the case. The Doctor has made friends with a colonel by the name of Lethbridge Stewart, who has come out to take command of the disarrayed soldiers. When they get back to the base, they find out that the web has encompassed more of the tunnels, getting closer and closer to trapping them in. Jamie has made an acquaintance with a cowardly soldier who seems very, very shady. The fight between the soldiers and the web intensifies, with it becoming harder and harder as they lose energy and hope. Jamie and Evans manage to get back to the base, where it's now believed that there is a traitor amongst them. While the Doctor, Victoria, Jamie and Evans chase down the suspected traitor from fleeing in the TARDIS, the webs take over the base, where Travers and his daughter Anne are just saved in the nick of time. The soldiers had left the place to try and save other areas of London, leaving it defenceless. Using the Great Intelligence's technology against the Yetis, taking control and using it as his own puppet, the Doctor is able to try and stop him. However, the Great Intelligence is one step ahead. Taking control of Travers, him and Victoria are taken hostage and held by the Yetis until the Doctor does what the Great Intelligence wants. He wants to take the Doctor's brain so he has the knowledge of all the thing the Doctor has, and wants to take over the Earth. Jamie does try to stop this, but it backfires, with the Doctor giving himself up to willingly save his friends. Jamie tries again, but this time the Yetis are all destroyed, with the Great Intelligence escaping into space-time. The Doctor is annoyed he could not destroy the Great Intelligence, but gathers his friends and disappears into the tunnels to the TARDIS.
What's a girl like you doing in a job like this?
Well, when I was a little girl, I thought I'd like to be a scientist, so I became a scientist.
I must admit, this has to be one of my favourite serials ever. I think it was here I realised that the adoration for Troughton's era was extremely well deserved. There are just so many stories throughout this season that just work so fantastically between the writers, the actors and the direction. It seems the closest to a modern Who story that we've had so far, and reminds me of the Centauran Stradrum two-parter in the second series of New Who. The setting of London Underground brings the already established villains and characters into a more familiar setting, taking threats that seem alien and hostile far away from the modern times into a heightened tension environment. The comparison between the soldiers trying to take on the Yeti and failing show that the monks in the previous serial had no hope at all, even though they stayed and tried to help. The Great Intelligence is an interesting concept for me because although I love this serial, he feels as though he is the weakest thing about it, with the Yetis being far more interesting villain than anything else. Finally, getting Lethbridge Stewart as a character is really, really fun, and seeing the first adventure he gets to have with the Doctor is great. When I started watching Doctor Who almost 20 years ago, I started with the Third Doctor era, so the Brig was one of the first Who characters that was permanent to me. The fact that he spans so many eras of this show in such a consistent way is great, and like the War Machines, it experiments more with the present day setting and using the military as a backup. This is further explored in the Invasion in the next season, which is more like the following era in terms of design and tropes. Fury from the Deep. The second last serial in Season 5 comes in the form of Fury from the Deep and contained the farewell of Deborah Watling playing Victoria Waterfield. It was written by Victor Pemberton, directed by Hugh David and produced by Peter Bryant. All 6 25-minute episodes are currently missing, though they have been animated in both colour and black and white. It is the last serial to be completely missing. The Doctor also demonstrated the sonic screwdriver for the first time in this serial. The overarching storyline of Victoria searching for a family after the death of her own is concluded, with her being adopted by a couple introduced in the serial, having become more confident and happier through her travels with the Doctor and Jamie. The story itself was based on a radio story, The Slide, written by Victor Pemberton and commissioned by Peter Bryant. In this radio play, Joseph Gomez plays the role that the Doctor would slide into, and he was portrayed by Roger Delgado, who would go on to play the Master in the future Doctor Who. It was first proposed by David Whittaker just before the airing of Season 2, round about the same time that The Slide aired on the radio, although Whittaker believed it was not appropriate for the show at the time.
You must join us. You will join us. Scream again, Victoria.
The TARDIS sets down in the middle of a sea, with the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria having to use a rubber dinghy to reach the shore. The three start a foam fight, having fun in the sea foam that lines the sea until Jamie spots the source of the foam. The Doctor investigates the pipe it is coming from using his new invention, the sonic screwdriver. Inside the pipe, he can see something sinister and alive, which prompts the Doctor into wanting to investigate more. Then, out of the blue, the Doctor is shot in the shoulder, followed by Jamie and Victoria. They awake to find themselves under guard in an oil refinery station. The people there want to know why they were messing with the pipe, but will not believe the Doctor when he tries telling the truth. Strange things are happening at the facility, with machinery breaking and people falling ill. Victoria wanders off, investigating for herself, before discovering foam and something alive writhing in the oxygen storage tank. She is saved just before disaster, and the Doctor starts to visit the ill, including the head scientist Harris's wife, Maggie, who has fallen into a coma. The workers at the plant are realising that there is something alive, but Robson, the guy in charge, refuses to stop, seeing it as a sign of weakness. As soon as Maggie was left alone, she becomes engulfed by the foam, with seaweed tendrils placing where she was. Victoria is starting to become tired of the constant peril of being with the Doctor, complaining as they narrowly escape death yet again. The Doctor and Jamie enter the pipes to find the creature living in there, where they find that the seaweed creatures from the deep have dredged up due to the drilling. It is infecting people at the plant, destroying their self-control and taking over. The Doctor, Jamie and Victoria travel to a rig where the seaweed is thought to originate. After finding the people left there, they use a recording of Victoria's scream to force the creatures back, causing them all to wither and die. Victoria is once again annoyed at the safety of being with the Doctor, so she decides to stay in England with the saved Maggie and Harris.
I was fond of her too, you know, Jamie.
Fury from the Deep is another one of those severely political serials that uses hot issues at the time to explore what the future could be like. In this case, along with the same lines before, it's about pollution and the effects of oil rigs. In particular, the combination of pollution and the lack of regard for the environment by the head of the base causes the issues, putting profit and efficiency above people's safety. This story weaves this narrative well, with other members of the crew becoming more at odds with the leader of the compound. This is another recurring theme throughout this season, and a crew eventually turning against their leader because they are bringing them down with them is something that is addressed fully. Now, this is something that could probably be analysed further, however, it's now time for our final meeting of the Victoria Defence Squad. Although she was with us for almost a full season, I felt like truly we haven't had enough time with Victoria, but I understand why her character left after this serial. Victoria went through what I believe is the biggest arc in Doctor Who, going from the Victorian young girl who lost her parents and her home to a young woman who came into her own intelligence and knew what she wanted from life. It was that reason that she stayed in England in the first place instead of travelling on, doing what she needed to do to move on with her life as she could. Victoria is absolutely fascinating as a character, mainly because she is constantly underestimated. She is one of the most emotionally intelligent characters in the show and grounds both Jamie and Doctor in a way no one else could. She is the heart of the show in this season, a role which Jamie takes on with the arrival of Zoe in the next serial, and for that she was a tough act to follow. The support and kindness she showed everyone, regardless of how terrified she was in this situation, was special, but that did not stop her from being a badass when she really needed to be. In her second serial, she sought a Cybermen while threatening the bad guy, and she constantly stood up to evil and injustice alone while the Doctor was not near. I think that's truly why this season in particular is just such a hard-hitting one in terms of characterizations and how it works. It is truly the end of an era when she leaves. The Wheel in Space. The final serial of the season came in the form of The Wheel in Space, made up of 6 25-minute episodes. It was written by David Whittaker, directed by Tristan DeVere Cole, and produced by Peter Bryant. After the departure of Deborah Watling in the previous serial, a new companion came in the form of Zoe Heriot, a 21st century astrophysicist played by Wendy Padbury. Only episode 3 and 6 still exist, and there is reconstructions or the audio narration. It has also featured the reappearance of the Cybermen for the second time this season. The characters were also, for the first time, international, with backgrounds from around the world, including Russia. Director DeVere Cole never again directed for Doctor Who, after having an argument with producer Peter Bryant over creative control. This serial has echoes of other Cybermen stories, using a space station that affects the Earth in order to seize control and invade. Fun fact, this is the first time that the Doctor uses John Smith as his alias, as Jamie panicked when coming up with a name and went with the first name that he saw on a nearby device. Also, the spacesuits worn by Jamie and Zoe also feature in the 2 Star Wars film worn by Bosk the Bounty Hunter.
He must be lured outside the force field and destroyed.
I'm going to try and trap the Doctor. Come on, let's get back and warn him.
With both Jamie and the Doctor being very depressed about leaving Victoria behind, a broken TARDIS lands on an abandoned spaceship. While investigating for some mercury to fix the TARDIS, they end up getting caught in an explosion which sends the TARDIS one way and Jamie and the Doctor another. The spaceship that they are on breaks up in the process. Both are saved by a nearby satellite station called The Wheel. They are looked after, but Jamie is interrogated thoroughly as the Doctor remains unconscious. Jamie meets Zoe, and together they begin to investigate what is going on with the abandoned ship. Turns out it is the Cybermen taking over the Wheel using the abandoned ship in order to invade Earth. The Cybermats are used to incapacitate specific members of the team to ensure a quick invasion. The Doctor heals, wakes up, and joins the investigation against the Cybermen, although he is at first under suspicion. Adding to the troubles, there is a number of meteors that are due to fly by, posing a danger to the Wheel and the people on board. Zoe's work relentlessly calculating whether or not they can escape them. While monitoring the meters, Zoe becomes irate with the way that the Wheel is run, realising that it's playing into the hands of the Cybermen. The higher-ups start turning on each other with weapons, and it turns out the Cybermen are using their advanced technology to take command of people's brains and taking control of the Wheel's operations. The Doctor uses his knowledge of the Cybermen to create an anti-command headpiece to prevent people from being taken over. Zoe and Jamie go into space to get the part to repair the TARDIS, although the head of the Wheel decides to destroy the meteors despite the risk that poses to them. Zoe and Jamie manage to avoid being crushed, however, and return to the Wheel with the required part. The Doctor rigs the Cybermen ship to explode, destroying the remaining Cybermen and returning to the TARDIS. Zoe wants to go with the Doctor, although Jamie is dead set against the idea. Not wanting her to get to the same level as Victoria, the Doctor shows her the dangers of his travels. she joins regardless.
Hey, I thought I told you...
I want to go with you.
Well, it's impossible.
Now, Jamie, it's not impossible, but it's something that we have to decide.
I did, in fact, spend a good 2 minutes gushing about how much I actually love Victoria, but she is not my favourite companion of this era. This serial showed the introduction of that character, and that's Zoe Heriot, the 21st century astrophysicist, who is an absolutely wonderful character, and the entire next season shows the development and just fun nature of her character. She comes across as quite cocky and aloof in the Wheel in Space, which is quite a brilliant characterisation for her as one of the first female characters to be the smartest in the room. Often she's compared to the Doctor and shown in numerous occasions it's actually smarter than the Doctor himself, and that stark contrast to the emotional intelligence of Victoria shifts the dynamic of the new trio, with the Doctor becoming more of the emotional heart rather than the intelligent side. This discreet shift is fun and refreshes the way that the stories are approached going forward. The story itself, I feel, is slightly underwhelming as a companion introduction story. It's once again a Cyberman story, which is overdone by this point. The Cybermen are a far more overused villain in their first 3 seasons than the Daleks were, which is why I think I'm getting a bit more fatigued with the stories regarding them. It also feels like nothing new is coming from them, with the same formula used every time. Where that formula worked with things like the Moonbase and Tomb, it really falls apart with this one and renders the serial forgettable and not overly that exciting. There are some nice character moments in there between Jamie and the Doctor, and for the first time since Susan, you can tell that the Doctor is seriously grieved by the loss of Victoria from his TARDIS. It's a nice addition to the serial, and Zoe is pointedly asking to come aboard, making her joining more of a choice than a chaotic burst in like a lot of companions before her. In total, I think Season 5 of Doctor Who is probably one of the peaks of Classic Who completely. It's just such a consistently good serial with only really 1, maybe 2 mildly duds, but they're not even that boring. They're still enjoyable serials when you get into them, and part of its lack of enjoyment is because it's only in audio. And I think ones like Abominable Snowmen might kind of perk up a little bit once you've got the visuals to go along with it. In total, this is just such rich storytelling with political allegories and commentaries and characterization and comparisons that it's just honestly such a good season for Doctor Who. And if anybody just wants to watch a single season, this is probably the one that I recommended. It's got so much of both the new and the old when it comes to Classic Who, and the Doctor, portrayed by Patrick Troughton throughout, is just absolutely fantastic and comes into his own perfectly. And who doesn't love a little bit of Doctor and Jamie? Because, you know, gotta love them too, eh? Thank you for listening, and I know it's been a long time since my last one of these, and that's because I have been just so swamped with work. But I have appeared in other ones, like I mentioned, Davis's commentary video, so if you want to hear me talk more about politicals and science and stuff, go and check that one out, and hopefully Season 6 will be far closer than the gap between Season 4 and 5. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.